we were at home during the February 1944 mini blitz, which was just as intense but didn't last as long.
Yeah.
And the aircraft came at night, of course. It wasn't any daylight bombing. And being streetwise, and the kids knew what was what. We knew which direction the bombers would come from. That is the southeast. And what would happen is, first of all, you'd hear, and then the air raid sirens would go. And as the aircraft got nearer, you then actually hear the Ack guns going just off like fireworks night. Big bangs all around. And then you'll get this droning sound. The Dad's Army people got it quite right when they were discussing the difference between German aircraft and British aircraft. In the German aircraft, sort of went because the engineers, as we found out later, didn't tune the engines to each other. So you get this and of course, as they got closer, it would get louder, and as they went away, the tone would change. So Mother would say, "It's all right, dear, they're going."
The house was badly damaged, and I was carried, because I'd hurt my leg, to a big underground shelter in an adjoining road. On the way, sorry if I'm going too fast,
No.
On the way we passed Preston's. Preston's was the local corner shop, the sweet shop, and of course we were only allowed 2 ounces of sweets a week. And the little window had been blown out, and as I was being carried, I saw this big bar of Cadbury's fruit and nut, and I bent down. I was so happy. I got this big bar, and it was wood. It was a dummy. I was so upset.
Oh, and the siren went in the night. I'd come downstairs, get in the shelter. And one of my sisters was an air raid warden on duty about every 10 days, sitting up all night with another neighbour. And she said it was quite nice, she got to know some of the neighbours.
Well, the first thing that would happen was the siren would go, and everybody would perhaps stand still and think what they were going to do, whether they were going to go down the shelter, whether they were going to stay indoors. I mean, I can remember my dad, we went down the shelter and he said, "No, I'm going to sleep in my own bed tonight." And, and the people that lived next door to us, they were Italian, and they'd come over here before the war, and they never feared anything. They never went in the air raid shelter. And when I think about it, I mean, they just didn't seem to worry about it. They came down from London because the doodlebugs had come, and the son lived here, so they came to live with the son. But the attitude to some people was, well, if it happens, it happens. I know they were older than my parents, so perhaps that was why they had that attitude.
When it was the alert, when the sirens went up and down, as they all turned them off, it wouldn't just stop. You get this 4 times. And that, of course, meant it was going to be trouble. When the all clear went, and it did that, it meant, you're okay. Everything is all clear.
My Uncle Joe took us to London to see Alice in Wonderland. And so we went to the theatre, Alice in Wonderland. It was, even though I was quite young. It was a rubbishy performance. When Alice was getting smaller, you had this three-legged table. Just all it was, these sticks would come up. Anyway, when we came out, there'd been an air raid, and we were told we could go off, but we stayed in. But we heard that. When we came out, London, fire brigades, buildings were on fire, firemen going up ladders, and so we started to come home. A heavy fog descended, so we couldn't get a bus. The bus went past, and I've never seen this before. It's lived in my life. The bus conductor was walking in front with a torch, flaming torch, and the bus was following, and we were walking. And I'll tell you how thick the fog was. This is hard to believe, but I promise you it's the truth. I'm walking alongside my Uncle Joe and my mum, and all of a sudden, I'm above them. And I somehow there was a sloping wall, and I was walking along a wall. It wasn't that high, but and then I had to be, but I could have fallen off. But I was walking along this wall without realising it. And the next thing that happened during this walk, there was because there was an air raid on, there was flaming shrapnel coming down. I mean, really big red block, and they carried on as if nothing had happened. But you did take this for granted. But it must have been extremely frightening for them. Me as a kid, it was an experience, and I'd been used to it and picking up shrapnel. You never thought something's going to hit you. But the next day when we got to Bush Hill Park, the road was covered with little bits of shrapnel and things. So, and it was just flaming coming through, cutting through the fog.
The siren was horrible. Have you ever heard it?
I have, yeah.
Whoa! And it used to turn my tummy.
There were 4 bunks in it, and bedding and so on, and we went down about 5-6 steps to get into it. It was half sunk, and it was fully reinforced. And my parents used they used it, of course, when I wasn't there because I was in the way. But I do remember we did use it. Because we were vulnerable with Brooklands being so near. I mean, Brooklands had been bombed. You probably got that. Yes.
I'll ask you about that a bit later.
And they put the barrage balloons up after it had been bombed.
And how long did you used to spend in the air raid shelter if there was an air raid? Could it be varied?
Well, if you were there, you were going to sleep there. You stayed sleeping there.
Okay.
One night in particular, there was a heavy raid, and during that heavy raid, my youngest aunt was born. My grandmother had 7 children. My mother was the eldest, and she was some 21 years older than her youngest sister. And the story goes that my youngest aunt, Aunt Jan, was born during an air raid, and that her father was on duty as an air raid precaution, and they couldn't go to the shelter because my grandmother was having a baby, and all births at that time were born at home. And the doctor was with her, and the midwife couldn't get to them because of the bombing. And I think on that particular night, about 9 people were killed in Douglas Road, Tolworth, because sticker bombs fell the length of the road, and there were a lot of casualties. And my grandfather was sent along with other members of the ARP, both men and ladies, to do what they could.
After the air raid, as I said, it was a very strange sensation between the alert and the all clear. Because although Dr. Goebbels told us we were all quivering in our shelters, the fact is there was just an air of apprehension. It's only when things really got noisy and you actually heard bombs, although I never heard a bomb.
At school, as I say, when the siren went, we were all ushered out. That's the only time that I think that I ever felt that we got to go. And some nights, you know, if the air raid went during the night, my parents would get us up and wrap us in a blanket and take us down the shelter. But I don't know, I think as a kid, as I said before, that the fact that it always happened, don't think really I took much notice.
Yeah. Did you ever have an air raid when, I think you did say this, when you were at school?
Oh,
had an
yeah.
air raid.
And then we were just marched across the road into these Anderson shelters. And the schooling would continue under the Anderson shelter.
Yeah.
You're sitting in benches, so it was limited what you could do, because they were just long trenches with wooden things either side and you're sitting in them. And a teacher trying to do a lesson sometimes.
Did you ever use a public shelter? What was that like?
Claustrophobic, smelly, whatever. But you felt secure. I mean, you wouldn't have been if they had a direct hit, but still, it was somewhere. The atmosphere usually, we were always fortunate, was quite good and things like that. But yeah, a bit basic. Toilet facilities with the bucket in the corner of the room with the curtain wrapped. Never got to that, I'm afraid. Yeah.
How long did air raids last out of interest? Were they really long?
They could last most of the night, sort of 6 hours, something like that, if it was a proper blitz. And I expect in this area it was, yeah.
Yeah. And how did you pass the time during that time?
Well, some people played cards, I suppose, or did this, that and the other. We just that. We didn't do very much.
Air raid at school. Yeah, we had air raid drill. We went out, you know, there would be, I suppose, they couldn't ring the bell because the bell was used for the end of lessons. So I suppose they used a whistle or a rattle or something to distinguish between the two. So we all filed out and we all sat in the shelter, you know, squeezed up, and we were all supposed to try and do lessons, you know, by, you know, add 2 and 2, that sort of thing.
I was doing, it was summer, I was doing a course at Wimbledon Art School. I was going up my train and went to Wimbledon Art School, and my father and my sister were both, my mother was at home, and she said that the pine trees went down like this and up again with a blast. But there was no warning.
Yeah, because it was middle of the day, wasn't it? Yeah.
And after that, they put I mean, the Germans knew where it was. They had photographs. I've got a book somewhere of all the photographs they took pre-war.
It was a huge base, wasn't it? Huge.
Yeah. I mean, they took photographs of the whole of the British Isles. They knew exactly where everything was.
Yeah. And what was the reaction to Vickers? Did you know anyone that worked there?
Well, there was a man down the road who was in the drawing, was a brilliant scientist, but only a brilliant man. He came up to my mother once. He said, "Mrs. Rod, they're dropping gas. They're dropping gas." Of course, that wasn't so. I mean, he flipped it a bit, you know. He was a brilliant... The line between madness and is very, very small. And she said, "Oh, well, I think we'll get the police." Because if there were gas being dropped, they painted the top of the pillar boxes so that they would turn colour if there was gas.
So they could tell?
Mustard, yes. Could tell mustard gas, yes. But of course, it was quite wrong. They hadn't. So she said, "Well, come on, I'll give you a cup of tea." It's all right, we'll get the police. And she did get the police. Of course, they took him. I mean, he was a, brilliant man at his job, but he just flipped it.
The big thing was, bang! Dust everywhere. First reaction, Mum screaming, I've lost my teeth. I've lost all my teeth, I had fallen to the ground. That noise was more important than the fact that I'd fallen out of the bunk bed, and I don't think I broke my leg, but I obviously damaged my leg. I mean, I broke my leg when I broke my leg twice that I can remember. Once dropping off, saying she'd catch me, and the other time might have been then, but I can't remember. I've got a feeling it was just badly damaged. And so that going out and running through and being carried round the corner of Preston's, seeing this little window blown out and that bar of chocolate, which so excited me and then disappointed me to the full, and into this other shelter, and then coming out the next day and not being able to go into your house and being moved into an house where there was an old lady in there. And don't forget, all you had was 2 downstairs rooms, 2 upstairs room and a box room.
There was the siren. And then there was a crash warning when the planes were overhead.
Okay.
So you did rush to the shelter.
What was that different then? The crash warning.
Yes. Horrid noise. How can I describe it? Like that.
Yeah. And imagine that would make you move faster.
Make you shake.
Yeah.
And when the doodlebug came and dropped on the Gap Road, which I saw, we all ran for it. And the school children, the dog and my mother all got under the table with my mother's behind sticking up. And when it exploded, even in the bright June days when the doodlebugs came, what you did, you either you kept the blackout up, or you drew the blinds and with clothes pegs, because the blast, there was no more of that sticky tape on the windows. So we just drew the blinds, so you would go into a semi-dark house during those nice bright summer days. And this one, because it was over there and our window was here, it just shook the windows and cracked one of the windows, but all the knickknacks on the fireplace all fell down.